Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. You have stepped into a course that is going to change the way that you look at data. Not just how you analyze it, but also how you communicate it. My name is Nivid Desai. I serve as the Program Executive at Writing Studio IIT Gandhinagar. Welcome to Writing for Data Science. This course is at the intersection of analysis and communication. As all of us know, data analysis is not just about coding and models. It is about solving real-world problems. And that is exactly why every single thought that goes into solving those problems needs to be communicated. And not just to one audience, across multiple stakeholders. That is where this course comes in. This course prepares you with the foundations of writing, especially curated for data science. We will discuss audience analysis, critical thinking, logical reasoning, as well as storytelling that is native to data science. So join me on a journey at the intersection of numbers and narratives. I'll see you in class. Namaskar, hello and welcome to Writing for Data Science. My name is Nivid Desai and we are on a journey to explore the interesting intersections of numbers and narratives. In the past few lectures, we have been looking at different strategies and approaches to reader-centric writing. We have looked at how to think about reader centricity and also how to put that into practice. We looked at some examples, thought about some questions, and did some exercises. However, in one of those lectures, if you remember, an interesting term emerged in our discussion. The term was mental models. And I promised you that I will get back to you with a detailed discussion on mental models. I understand that in many cases, this may be your introduction to a new term, and I am excited for you to find out what mental models mean. How do they function, and why do we need to worry about them, especially if we want to make our writing reader-centric. So, in today's lecture, we will go through an introduction to audience mental models. We will look at what some of those models can be and why they are important in our practice. The next few lectures are going to be a deep dive into this new and exciting term, audience mental models. So let's begin. Our first point of inquiry would be a simple question. What are mental models? Let's look at what the functioning understanding of a mental model can be. A mental model is a person's internal understanding of how something works. It is a simplified, personal version of experience, education, beliefs, and expectations. You may otherwise know it as a broader term called perspective. But I understand that the word perspective may sometimes be a little vague. It may be subjective also. Mental models, as the term suggests, concern themselves with structures. That is why we are dissociating them from the broader definition of a perspective and landing them within a functional understanding, a structural understanding known as mental models. Mental models help us interpret new information, they help us make decisions quickly, and they also help us predict outcomes every time that we look at something new from a preset notion of how they may work. Now, this is as far as our own mental models are concerned. In our case, we may also be looking at the audience's mental models. And they may be the same or different from our own mental models. In communication, a mental model influences how someone understands what you are saying or whether they understand it at all. In the case of our own inquiry within communication, within writing, within critical thinking, it is important to align our message, align our output with the receiver's mental model because it ensures that they understand what we are trying to say or whether they understand it at all or not. For example, a person who thinks that AI is magic has a very different mental model than a person who thinks AI is just math. These models affect what they trust, what they fear, and how they respond to explanations. Because their core beliefs have shaped the way that they approach anything new, any new information that comes their way. So, since AI is a new breakthrough technology, the baggage of understanding that they are carrying to this new concept is going to shape the way that they are responding to this new concept. At the beginning, I would like you to reflect on this one question. Can you recall a time when someone misunderstood you? Not because of what you explained to them, but because they saw the issue differently. And this may not be within a professional or academic area. This may very well have happened in your personal life as well. Because I understand that we are talking about something academic or something professional, but communication is not only restricted to our professional capacities, to our academic capacities. Communication, in fact, truly begins in our personal capacity. So, if you would like to come up with an example from your life where you try to explain something to someone, but they did not understand you, not because your lack of explanation, but because they saw the issue differently. Think about that instance, will you? I'll see you again. Now that we understand what we mean by the term mental models, let's look at why they are important and why they matter in communication. When we write or speak, we often assume that our audience shares our understanding of the topic. That if they are listening to us, it is highly likely that they may know what we are talking about. It seems like a natural assumption, but oftentimes it falls short of accuracy. This is called the curse of knowledge. Once we know something, it is hard to remember what it felt like to not know it. This is why communicating with children often tends to be a challenge. Imagine someone discovering an apple for the first time in their life. They've not seen an apple ever. How would you explain to them what an apple is? How would you respond to their curiosity upon seeing an apple or tasting an apple for the first time? This is what we call the curse of knowledge. Now, if you scale this up and if you turn this into a theoretical understanding, anything that we know as information, anything that we know as knowledge, becomes solidified into a single unit. So, communicating it to someone who may not know it becomes a problem. Therefore, it is important that we first become aware of our audience's mental models. If we don't recognize our audience's mental models, our communication may confuse them or worse, alienate them. The audience may also draw incorrect conclusions. And the last threat, we may lose their trust or attention. Doing all of this ensures the reader centricity of your writing. And that is why being sensitive towards your audience's mental models is extremely important. For example, if you explain confidence intervals to a policymaker as if they were a data scientist, you may lose them. Because, like we have studied in the previous few lectures, a data scientist uses a different kind of language as compared to a policymaker. But if you say that it is like a weather forecast, it tells us the range where we expect the real number to fall. In this case, you have matched their mental model because they are more likely to receive information when you compare that with something within the existing world that they understand. At this stage, let's do a quick exercise. Explain a complex term, for example, an algorithm or an AI, in a way that fits your grandparents' mental model. If you were to explain what an algorithm is to your grandparent, or if you were to explain what AI is to a grandparent, how would you do it? Because you would need to match your grandparents' mental models. Now I understand that I have not yet acquainted you with the types of mental models that there would be, but I want you to make an instinctive guess. What does your instinct say? You've known your grandparent for a lot of years. You've spent time talking to them. You've spent time knowing how they think. So, what does your instinct tell you? How will they receive the information best while understanding a complex concept like algorithm or AI? It'll be a fun exercise. I'll see you again with the types of mental models. Let's begin by understanding the different types of mental models. People hold different types of mental models based on their role, their training, their values, and experiences. Understanding these models helps you shape your message effectively. Let's look at each of these different mental models and understand who their target audience may be and what kind of approach should we decide while talking to them. The first mental model is the functional mental model. In this case, the audience is more curious about how things work. So, it is used by engineers, analysts, and technicians. They like mechanism-based explanations and logical sequences. So, while explaining something to a data engineer, you might say that the data pipeline breaks because the transformation logic doesn't handle null values correctly in the second stage. This little passage that you see on your screen right now. Pay close attention to how it explains how things work. Talking about mechanisms, talking about logical sequences, talking about how one thing causes the other in a technical sense. This communication is a response to a functional mental model. And to a data engineer who follows this kind of a mental model, this will be the appropriate way of communicating a message to them. Let's hold 1 minute for some reflection. How would you explain a system failure to someone who wants to understand what went wrong step by step? That's your clue that this is a functional mental model person. They want to know what went wrong, not just from a bird's eye point of view, but step by step. How would you do that? How would you break down the entire process? And that would be your reflection for the functional mental model. I'll see you again with the second one. As opposed to the functional mental model, the second mental model is outcome based mental model. These models are focused on results, actions, and impact. Some people who are more inclined towards using an outcome based mental model would be executives, marketers, and business strategists. In that case, they want to know what happened and what should we do, not so concerned about how it happened, which is the question that the previous mental model asked. So, for example, to a manager, you might say improving email targeting could increase customer retention by 15%, bringing in an estimated $500,000 per quarter. If you see this clearly, it lays out what happened and what should we do in one single sentence. It answers both these questions as efficiently as possible. So, having this as a model, I want you to do another exercise. Rewrite this sentence that you see on your screen for an outcome focused stakeholder. The churn model uses decision trees and logistic regression for better accuracy. Your clue for this is that the outcome is better accuracy, clearly laid out over here. So, if you were to communicate the same insight to an outcome focused stakeholder, how would you redraft this? How would you rewrite this to fit their mental model? Take some time, go through a couple of revisions, and I will see you again with the third mental model. Now let's arrive at the third mental model. I understand that as an educator, I am not supposed to tell you my own preferences, but I can't resist myself from sharing the fact that this mental model is the one that excites me the most. As an educator, as a broadcaster, as a communicator, I am fascinated by the possibilities that this third mental model consists within itself. Yes, the third mental model is the story based mental model. These models organize informations as narratives with causes and consequences. They are used by the general public, by policymakers, and by journalists. These audiences like analogies, stories, and simple cause effect logic. A happened, therefore B happened, therefore C happened. So everything is consistent across the entire line of narrative and linked together by causes. That design takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of deliberation, and understanding that your audience has to optimize both for information as well as attention. Here's an example. Instead of technical phrasing, try doing something like this. Think of the model like a teacher who learns what mistakes students make and helps them do better next time. This is a comparison of a model that has technical capacities with the audience's real life understanding of what a teacher's duties are. And it connects this understanding, the audience's understanding, with the functionality of the model. And the audience may not know nor care about the technical proficiency of the model. They are more concerned about the utility. And not just in plain terms, but with a story, with a narrative. I begin all my lectures with this one line that we are on an interesting journey to look at the intersections of numbers and narratives. This is what I mean. The power of a narrative helps you connect with a wider audience, both technical as well as non-technical. So, sharpening this skill will help you broadcast your message to people whom these analyses actually impact. And it'll help you become a leader in the long run. But before we become leaders, we must reflect. So here is the next reflection for you. When have you learned something better through a story or example than through a technical explanation? You may have come through different instances across your learning journeys, both in school as well as in college. Have you learned something more efficiently by using stories, by using examples, rather than a technical explanation? Think about it. What difference did it make? Think about why it made you feel the way that it made you feel. I'll see you again with the fourth mental model very soon. Let's move ahead with the last mental model for the day, the fourth one, value-driven mental model. These mental models are shaped by ethics, values, goals, and beliefs. They are used by policy advocates, public institutions, and consumer groups, particularly those who are more concerned about the ethical implementation of analysis and the policy that is born out of that analysis. They want to know, is this fair? Is this safe? Does this align with our values? So these would be the principal questions that they would ask when they are targeted with any new information. For example, when explaining a predictive policing model, you may say something like this: the algorithm may unintentionally reflect bias from past data. We have added checks to ensure fairness and transparency. Look at this sentence very closely. There are three key qualities, key values that are reflected in that sentence. Bias, which is unwanted, it is to be rectified. And how do we rectify it? With checks, and that ensures fairness, desirable, and transparency, also desirable. So these are values that you emphasize as remedies of the inherent flaws within your analysis. That is what ensures that your communication fits in really well with a value-based mental model. And here is the last exercise for the day for you. You can write a short message explaining an AI system to someone who is concerned about privacy and fairness. I'm sure you would be keeping up with some conversation about AI art. Think of an artist who would be more concerned about both privacy and fairness, and explain to them what an AI system does. Because their worldview would be a value-driven one. Their concerns would be value-driven. So you would need to address them in your communication, which centers them as an audience. So that was it from my side as far as an introduction to audience mental models was concerned. Rest assured, our journey is not done yet. We will take another few lectures to understand mental models in their depth and breadth, and I assure you it'll be just as exciting and just as filled with energizing exercises. And I hope that we carry this understanding on to the next few lectures so that our foundation remains unwavering. Our connection with the previous larger question about reader-centric writing continues on with our specific exploration of mental models. And I hope that we are also carrying that understanding of reader-centric writing with us as we go deeper into mental models. In the next lecture, we will first start discussing how to identify our audience's mental model. Because so far, we have looked at the types of mental model. But how do you identify who your audience is and what kind of mental model they may possibly practice? I understand that that can be a curious query that you have by the end of this lecture. Don't worry. In the next lecture, we will first begin by discussing identifying audience mental models, and then in the subsequent lecture, we will look at strategies of communicating with those mental models. So for the next couple of lectures, we are going down the lane of exploring mental models in as much depth and detail as possible. Stay with me, will you? It'll be a fun ride. I wish you all the best in your learning, stay curious, and I will see you once again in the next lecture. Thank you so much, all the best, Namaskar.